What's up, guys? So in this video we will be building the age calculator. It's a challenge from website frontendmentor.io where we have provided design and we need to build a simple age calculator based on this design, which will be responsive. So we have the mobile version and the desktop version. We will be using React and Tailwind for this task. For beginning, we will create inputs array which will have 3 objects. Each object will have its own ID, name, type, placeholder. Also we'll need error message for each input. And the label. And now we will copy this object and create 2 more objects for day, month, and year. Using this inputs array will make our job easier, so we'll just map over it and display the form component, which we will create separately. So let's begin by styling the main container div. We will set min height screen, overflow hidden, background gray. We will need item center, flex column. We'll set margin X to auto. And we'll set padding to 11. Next, we'll need to create one more div inside and set the class name to background white. Set the width to full and max width will be 50 rem. It will be flex column. Item center, justify center, and set borders to rounded large, and set the padding to 7. Now let's create a form element and set the class name to flex column and width full. And inside this form element we will need to create a div, and inside of this div we will map the inputs array, and for each input we will return form input component, which we will import. And now let's start creating it. I have already separately created the component folder and the form input JSX. But before, let's set the class name of the div, which is holding the inputs, to flex. Set gap to 6 and margin bottom to 11. Now we can start writing our form input component. Let's add label and input element. Set type to text. Let's set the class name to flex column and the class name of the label. We open the backticks and set tracking to 0.2 rem. The size of the text we set to 0.8 rem. Font will be semi-bold. Let's set the uppercase letters and text gray 600, the color of the text. Let's open the backticks for input class name as well. And let's set the width to full. Padding will be 2. Let's set the border. Height to 9. Font bold. And the text will be 1.3 rem. And also the borders will be rounded to medium. So let's see how our input looks. Next, what we will do is we need to add the button, which will be inside the div element. And we will need to import the icon, which will be inside the button element. So let's import the icon from assets, icon arrow, svg. And set the source of the image file to this icon. Let's write the alt text, will be arrow icon. Now let's style the button. So class name will be background purple. It's a custom color which I added to Tailwind config. And on the hover we'll have the same color, but it will be the opacity lowered by 20. The button itself will be flex, justify center, item center, and width will be and height set to 16. And it will be fully rounded, so it will become a circle. Now let's style the button container div. Let's set it to relative, flex, justify center, and width full. Now to add the line which is shown in the picture, we need to use this div. So let's set the class name to width full. We will set the border. Height will be set to 0. The display will be set to absolute. Top will be 50%. But as you can see, this line is overlaying the circle, the button, which we don't need. So we need to set the z index of the button to 10. And now the button will overlay the div element. Now it looks good. Below the form element, we add one more div. And inside the div, we add paragraph. And span inside that paragraph. Let's just hard code for now. Let's write 38 years. And let's style the div. Let's set the class name to margin top 11. And let's set self start. The class name of the paragraph will be, let's set transition all. Set font to italic. Let's add ease in, which will be useful for the future animation which we'll use. Let's set font to bold. Set duration to 500. And the size of the text will be 3.8 rem. The class name of span, let's set text to purple. We will import a couple of props. And we will simply destructure props. And we will need label, handle change, placeholder, name, date, error message, and error. Now let's create a couple of states. So let's import the useState. And first we'll create a date. And for the default, our date state will be an object containing year, month, and day properties, which will be set for empty strings for now. Let's duplicate this and rename to age and set age. We will also need the error state, and let's create error and set error, which will be an object. And the object will be year, month, and day, 3 properties which will be booleans. And let's set them to false. Now let's pass the props to form input. Okay, so that's all our props. But I think we have a bug, and it is that we have not created the handle change function. We are passing the handle change, but we have not created yet. So let's create it. Handle change, and as props it will receive the event object. And let's destructure the event object. We'll take out the name and the value variables from the event target. Okay, now it works. So we will use this name and value variables to update our state. So each input has its own name, like day, year, and month. So based on that input, we will receive the name of the input and we'll update the correct state object property. Now let's set the onChange to handle change. And add value to date name. So now we will have the controlled inputs. Also let's set the placeholder. We will also need to add span element and display the error message inside that span. And to correctly display the error, let's open the $sign in the label class name. If the error name is true, then we will need to set the color of text to red 600. So let's set the error to true, for example year. So our label of year is red. So let's do the same for the input. In case of the error, we will set border red to 600. So our border will become red. Now let's style a span element. Let's open up the backticks, set text size to 0.8 rem. And in case of error, if we have error name to true, let's set text red to 600 and also set the display to block. Otherwise, we will set it to hidden. So if we don't have error, we will not display the span element, and if we have the error, it will display the span element. Okay, so now we need to create the handle submit function, which will help us to validate the input and display the years. So handle submit function will receive event as an argument. Let's write the prevent default, so we will prevent the default behavior of the button of the browser. We will need to destructure the state, our date state. We will need to take out the year, month, and day variables. Also, let's create the input date variable, which will be the new date object. And this date object will be created based on the user inputs. So we will take our variables from the state, year, month, and day, whatever user has entered, and we'll create the date object based on that. Then we'll create the current date, which will be just simply the new date object, which will display the current time. And also we'll need days in month variable, which will be new date object based on the year and month of the user input. This date object will get us the specific month which user has specified, so it will help us in validation. So if the user enters incorrect days for that month, incorrect day for that month, we will know that this is an error and we will display it. Also, let's create isValid variable, which will be set to true for now. Now we need to create a couple of if statements. So this if statement checks if the input for the day is not a number, if the day is less than 1, and if the day is greater than the number of days in the given month. Then we need to display the error. So we will set the isValid to false and set the error object, update the error state. To set the day to true. Else, we'll set the day property to false. Here we check if the user's input date is greater than the current date and if the input for the year is not a number. So if the date is set to future, we'll have the error. So again, we will set the isValid to false. And update the error state and set the year property to true. Else we'll set to false. And here we compare the month extracted from the input date, which is 0 based, so we add 1, with the user's input for the month. So if they don't match, it's an invalid month. And also we'll check if it's not a number. And in that case as well, we'll set to isValid to false. Set the error state to month property to true. Otherwise, we'll set to false. Okay, and it seems that our if statements are outside the handle submit function, so let's move them inside. So in case all the if statements are passed and our isValid variable is true, now we will create the age years variable, which will calculate the difference in years between the current year and the year of the input. It subtracts the input date year and the current date's year to determine how many years have passed since the input date. And we will create the age months variable as well, which will calculate the difference in months. And age days, which will calculate the difference in days between the current day and the day of the input. Okay, so now we need to write the condition to check if the age months is less than 0, which means that the current month is smaller than the input month. If that's the case, it implies that the birthday has not occurred yet this year, so we need to decrement the age years by 1 to account for this. Additionally, if the age months is exactly 0, meaning that the current month is the same as the input month, but age days is negative, it means that the current day is smaller than the input day. This also implies that the birthday has not occurred yet this month, so we still need to decrement age years by 1. After decrementing age years, we add 12 to age months to properly account for the current month being smaller than the input month. And here we check if the days are negative, which means that the current day is smaller than the input day. So we need to decrement months by 1. And to account for this, after decrementing months, we add the correct number of days for the previous month to ensure the correct age calculation. It may sound a little bit complicated if you are doing it for the first time, but if you go through it a couple of times, it really makes sense and it becomes easier. And finally, we update our age state and we set the year to age years, month to age months, and day to age days, which we will display in our component. So instead of hard-coded 38 years, we will set to age year. And let's try to display it. Let's try to calculate. And I think we have a bug somewhere. All of our fields are setting error. And I think I know what's the issue. I just forgot to add name attribute to our input element. Name set to name, and now everything works. It correctly calculates the years. Now let's continue with the display. And also, when the user enters the days, months, and years and we get a display, we want this to be animated. So the years will start from 0 and get to the final number animating. So for that, we will use the React CountUp dependency, which will help us to animate the number. So we will import the CountUp from React CountUp. And to use it, we will write CountUp as a component with self-closing tag. And we will add the start attribute set to 0 and end set to age year. And it animates it, so it works. We can also add class name to our CountUp component. And let's open the backticks, set text color to purple, open the $sign, and if the age year is false, meaning that we don't have the years set yet, then we'll set display to hidden to none. So hidden means that. And otherwise we'll set display to inline. Now let's add the span element. In case we don't have year, to display these 2 dashes based on our design. And let's set the class name to text purple. Open the $sign. In case we don't have our input, we will display this span, otherwise we'll hide it. Now let's copy this paragraph and add it 2 times for year, month, and days. Now let's test our inputs. We'll write the correct ones. For now, it displays correctly. Now let's try to set 0 to days. We have an error, so it works. Now let's try to set incorrect months. It works as well. Now let's set the future date. It also works. In case if we don't set anything, it also works. In case if it's a string, it's also working. So our logic is working. Now let's move on to displaying 2 bigger screens, which we will not have many work to do since it's a very small component. Also, I forgot to add the key to form input component because we are mapping it, and we need, when we are mapping anything, we need to add the key attribute. So that's what we will use the ID for, and the ID of the inputs array. Now for the main container, for the medium size, let's set justify to center. Let's round the bottom right corner of our component, so it will be like in the design. For the medium size as well, let's set gap to 8 and margin bottom to 4. Gap between our inputs. Let's set justify end for the button in our medium size. And also let's make the button a little bit bigger. Let's set to 20. and the size of the icon as well. Let's set to width 10. Now it looks better. For our paragraphs, we will just set margin top to 2. And let's make the size of the text bigger for the medium screen to 6 rem. And let's do the same with other paragraphs as well. Now let's go to form input component and set width to 20% for the medium screen. Also, let's set the height of the input to 14. And the text, let's make it a little bit bigger. So that's it. I think we're done. It looks like almost like the provided design. So that's it with the age calculator. I hope you guys enjoyed, and that's it for now. Thank you for watching. And you can subscribe for more content which will be released. See you.